Welcome to Speak as One. I'm Julie Corrieth. Today we have with us Jason Fox. Welcome, Jason.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we're here today to talk about mental health, and I love to hear people's stories. So I'd love for you to tell me about, your former background.
Yeah, I grew up here in Texas, in Fort Worth, Texas. Sports were always a huge passion in my life, sports and music. I was fortunate to go to the University of Miami on a football scholarship. I got to play there for 4 years. Was also blessed and fortunate to get drafted in the NFL to the Detroit Lions. Played there for 4 years, and then got to finish my career with the Dolphins for a couple more years. So had a I guess average career in the NFL, and then since then I've started a company that I'm super passionate about called EarBuds that was built around the premise of sharing music in real time, like a kind of a Twitch for music. And now we're releasing a new product just to be the best place to share music, period. And we're really excited about that.
Oh, it sounds exciting.
Yeah.
Well, so you grew up in Fort Worth. Can you tell us a little bit more just about growing up and what that was like when you started, playing football? And then, of course, I always need to hear the mental health component. When did you start to understand more about mental health?
So I played every sport growing up, and I think that was just my parents' attempt to get me out of the house. And so baseball and soccer and football and basketball and track, and I tried to do everything in high school too, and I think I naturally just excelled at football a little bit more. But I started football in the 7th grade because my mom wouldn't sign a permission slip before that. She thought I was going to get hurt or something, but I was probably bigger than most of the kids. And honestly, so I that was kind of where I don't want to say my life revolved around that, because I didn't want to ever place my identity in sports, but that was just probably my biggest passion growing up, and it opened up a lot of doors for me, and I got to go to college for it, and got to have a career in the NFL for it. But mental health, I think, really became apparent for me not in really high school. I probably just didn't. People didn't really talk about it then. I didn't really
like they do now.
Like they do now. Like it wasn't an everyday conversation you have with people, and it's still not an everyday conversation you have with people. But it wasn't. It just wasn't a conversation I had. I didn't know a lot about it.
Mm-hmm. Did you, looking back on it now, do you recognize like maybe you did have some friends that were going through things, or maybe you yourself went through some things, but you just didn't know what it was because it wasn't talked about?
Absolutely. I mean, there was definitely times in my life, and definitely times in family members or friends, or that you can look back at and know those moments. But and this is exactly why I'm here talking with you. This is exactly why I think people should have those conversations, because I think the opportunity the opportunity to have that conversation instead of the alternative, I think that's where people really struggle. When they're alone, when they try to battle it themselves, when they don't think anybody else is going through it, or they don't think anybody else understands, or they're too scared to say, hey, I could use some support right now, or hey, do you mind if I talk to you about this, or I'm really struggling with this. What do you think I should do? And I think community is super important with that.
And you probably had a lot of that in sports, growing up. And it sounds like with your family too. You're really close with your family?
Absolutely. Yeah. I have a brother. So I only have one sibling, and then my parents, and they've always been super supportive of me. And we're a tight family. We see each other quite often, and I don't like blame them that we didn't talk about that more. It was just something we didn't talk about. We didn't talk about. But since then, my parents and brother have been several times in my life have helped me through difficult times and dark times, and hopefully I've been able to help them when they're struggling. So yeah, family, and community, and your friends, like that is that is something that, people need to speak up, and whether they see their friends struggling or if you're struggling, it's okay. We should normalize, saying, I'm not doing well right now. I need some help. I need, hey, will you talk with me? Hey, will you pray with me? Hey, will you, be there for me? Will you help me get through this? And that's totally okay. And I think as a society, I think that's what we should be pushing towards.
I know you're younger than I am, so were you texting in high school?
Barely.
Okay.
Texting was invented when I was like a junior in high school, and it was like you had to press like the 7 key like 4 times to get to an S. It was before.
Okay, I didn't know where we were on that, but I was able to talk to a couple of college athletes this week, and it seems like for them, and even in high school, they were like, even if our friends just send us a text message, which I think is interesting, and knowing that there's, just to say, oh, hey, are you okay? Just via text message. And I actually tried it, because usually I feel like I'm a person that's want to talk more important in person and ask, hey, how are you doing? Or like, hey, let's meet for coffee. But I did try it after they said that, just to say like, hey, are you okay? I've been thinking about you. And then this person came back and was actually like, no, I'm so glad that you're texting me. And I know this sounds so old, like I'm not going to say that, but now just to even hear from like the younger generation, like that we can take that as well and implement it into, having conversations with people.
It's so funny you mentioned texting, because when I get those texts, it's they make you feel good, and it makes you feel that it makes you realize, because it, right? Mm-hmm. You know that people care about you. You know that you have people in your life that love you unconditionally, and that people care for you and want the best for you. Mm-hmm. But sometimes when you're struggling or when you're dealing with, whether it's depression or any other mental health issue, you don't feel like that. And I'm a Christian. I think the enemy talks to you, the devil talks to you, and he wants to keep you away from your community of believers and the people that love you and care for you, because he can speak loudly when they're not around. Mm-hmm. But there's a guy, I've had several friends in my life, even recently, text me like, hey, how you doing? Is there anything I can pray for you? Like, I saw this, how you doing with that? Or I just want to let you know, man, I'm thinking about you, I'm praying for you. There's one guy in my life, his name's Lyle. I love Lyle. I mean, we're friends, and he's a little bit older than me. He served in our military, and about once, every couple months, once a month, he sends me a long text in the morning. He's like, hey man, you're on my heart, thinking about you. And I feel so good after getting that text. Mm. And he probably doesn't even know that. And he's just such a great guy. And he's not, I see him probably once a year, if that. Like, he's not like even super close. He just reaches out and checks in with me. And that always makes me feel incredible. And, whether that's, seeking help or reaching out to the people that you think, just to check in on them, or mm-hmm. They might be going through something, they might be dealing with something. I think that's super helpful and really important.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think about that too, as we're talking about how you're growing up, and our parents didn't have that type of information around mental health that we are starting to gather now. And for our viewers out there and parents out there, that might even be a simple way to check in even with your kids, mm-hmm. Because they are more geared towards phone and texting and things. And not only with our friends and our loved ones, just to send them a little something, but it might be in, just an easier way if you're having a hard time of wondering, how do I even approach my child about something, to send it in that way. And I'm not a doctor, so but just as we're talking about it, thinking about tools and resources, for parents to be able to talk to their kids.
The phone is a great tool to be able to reach out to someone, but it's also probably one of the leading indicators or leading causes of, there's a lot of, pressures, and whether you're on your phone, you're, addicted to work stressing you out, or, whether, this could happen to anyone at any age group, a young kid, or where you could compare your life to someone else's on social media and see like, well, why am I not there? Why is this happening to me? Why did this fall through? Why don't I drive that car? Why don't I live here? Why don't I do this? And so I think we should start leveraging what the phone has to offer and checking in with people is to balance out or even counteract some of the mental health issues sometimes it causes on people.
Yeah, and I'm so thankful I didn't grow up in that age because I experienced some of that as an adult. After I got a divorce, I would, if I was on social media and I would see these families posting stuff, I was so crushed at the time.
Yeah.
And I was comparing my life and not feeling worthy in a sense because I'm a single mom now and stuff like that. And luckily I'm past that. But it did make me think about, I'm a full grown, developed brain adult here, and I was struggling with that,
Right.
And these impressionable kids, it's just got to be challenging. But I love what you had to say just about like community and surrounding yourself, and it sounded like you had that growing up. So then, I'm sure like leaving your home and going off to college, with this amazing career in front of you is so exciting. But what does that look like once you actually get there? Is there any fears or, how is it as a college athlete?
Yeah. I think there's a lot of pressure on college athletes these days. Even more now they're getting so much money with these NIL deals and these collectives and the things I wish were around when I was playing in college. But it was, there was several things that happened in college. When I wanted to get away from home. I wanted to get out and see the world, experience some places. And, Miami was one of the top programs at the time when I was a senior in high school, and I got, offered a scholarship to go there. And, they had been recently won a lot of championships. They were putting people in the NFL, and I wanted to go there so badly. And so I hopped in my truck, drove to Miami. And when I got there, I was so excited. But, months in, I was like, where am I? Like, this is a totally new culture for me. Like, I remember one time I was so frustrated. I was trying to get somewhere. And this is back before the iPhone where you had maps on your... So I pulled over to a gas station and I asked them, like, hey, how do you get here? And nobody spoke English in the whole gas station. I was like, all right, where am I right now? Like, so that like homesickness set in. And then there's a lot of little things, but I think the big thing I think about from my college experience is I worked really hard to be the best player that I could be and with the tools God's given me. And I, my goal was to win a championship and go to the NFL. Those were my two goals. We didn't win a championship when I was there. But, I always thought that, in a lot of the mock drafts and, predictions, and agents hit me up saying I was going to be this top pick. And I was really excited about that. But my whole draft process was where I really started where that was probably the first time I went into like a depression. Because my very last game ever in college, I blew out my knee, which if you want to be drafted high, I recommend you not do that. When the NFL teams decide, they're going to decide on the guy with two healthy knees. So
up to this point, you haven't had any injuries?
I've had injuries, but not, a blown knee or something. I started 4 years. I hadn't missed a game. I was relatively healthy. You get nicks and bruises and stuff, but there's a lot of coaches say, are you hurt or are you injured? Because if you're hurt, you can play through it. And if you're injured, if you have a torn ACL, you can't play. That's just what it is. And so, I was dealing with a major injury at a time that I didn't want to deal with it at. And that was really on my mind of like, how is this going to affect my draft status? How is this going to affect all the things I worked so hard for? And so that's when I was really started to experience some of these just depression a little bit, just to call it what it is. And through the rest of my draft process, things kept happening. at a pro day, and my agent told me just to jog it the week before the draft.
Can you break down that lingo a little bit?
Yeah, so a pro day is, if you've heard of the NFL Combine, people get, I think it's 250 or 255, or maybe it's 300. It's 250 or 300. Get invited, and you get to work out in front of all the scouts and all the coaches and all the GMs, and you get to show how strong you are, how fast you are, how quick you are, how you can move. You can show off your athleticism. Well, I was invited to the Combine, but I couldn't participate in any of that because I only had one knee, and so I just interviewed. And so my agent said, and then pro day is an opportunity for anyone at your college, whether they got invited to the Combine or not, to run a 40, to do a broad jump, to do a vertical jump, to do drills. And he was like, well, just jog it. Show them that your knee's healing. And one of my assets I had when I was in college is I was one of the faster linemen. So I was like, oh, I just have to run 140. I can run. And so a week before the draft, it was like 5 days before the draft, I get in a 40-yard stance style, and I'm like, I'm just going to run. And about 20 yards into it, because I hadn't been training and my knee had been whatever, I tear my hamstring off the bone. And I face plant in front of all 32 head coaches. And that night, my agent told me, or like after that, I couldn't work out. Now only do I only have one knee, I only have one working hamstring. And my agent told me, he said, hey, you might not get drafted. And that was the first time in a while at that point in my life where I just bawled my eyes out from the second I got home till the next day. I didn't think I slept a wink. I was, everything I've worked for so long, and to be told, hey, you might be a top couple round, you might be a first or second round pick, to, hey, you might not be drafted, is a big swing of emotions by a lot, because hey, a lot of undrafted guys don't make the team, so your dream of playing in the NFL is over. You don't have a signing bonus anymore. It felt like all I worked for was gone, and I fell into a dark depression.
Can you tell me a little bit about what your depression looked like? Was it harder for you to get up in the morning, or was it, did you have any suicidal thoughts, or, would you mind explaining that a little more?
Yeah. I think, and we might talk about this later, but I've battled with depression since, and it's depending on the time or the place or the situation. It might be a little bit more or less certain symptoms than others, but generally, I'm a super high motivated guy, a high energy guy that have always been self-sufficient and driving, or I let self-determination, and like, I can get up in the morning, I'm gonna work out, I'm gonna work hard today on whatever I'm working on, I'm gonna get it done, I'm gonna get it done at a super high level, I'm gonna do, I'm gonna manage my day super efficiently, I am going to win this day, I'm gonna win this week, I'm gonna do everything to the best of my ability. And that, it's like if you watch like a motivating podcast, it's like, that's how I wanna live my life. And when I'm not depressed, that's how I try to and to live. But my life doesn't look like that when I'm depressed. When I'm depressed, I don't get up at 6 or 6:30 or 7 in the morning. I get up at 8:30 because it's hard to get out of bed. I'm struggling. I don't need coffee when I'm throwing. If I'm drinking 6 cups of coffee that day, it's because I'm lacking energy. I'm lacking this. I'm questioning a lot of thoughts in my head. I'm doubting myself, when doubting myself is not something I've ever really dealt with. And not, to be honest with you, there's times in my life where I've had dark thoughts and suicidal thoughts because of certain situations. And thankfully, I've never, got close to actually doing that. But there's been times where I was not just in a good place, as far as mental health wise. It was a lot of times it was when I've not stepped away from faith, but it was like just not actively pursuing God. And I think that is like when I start to get depressed, I think that is like the first place I try to check myself on now is like, hey, have I been reading His Word? Have I been going to church? Have I been doing community groups? Have I been doing this stuff? And the answer to that is no, which it normally is. That's the first thing I try to do, and that's helpful. And I think that's the ultimate resource. But I think some of the things we talked about earlier, like community, and bringing your loved ones and the people that care about you into those conversations, I think can help that as well.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you opening up about this. I think it's so important on so many levels, and I want to share with you what somebody told me the other day, and I think it's so important. She said, if people really think about it, we've all, on some level, experienced thoughts of suicide. And she said, I wish people could frame that as when they start having those thoughts, that it might be okay for you to think about what this next part of your life is going to look like. Because sometimes it is okay for us to say, wait, this certain part of my life that's kind of taken me to this point, we're at a point where it's not feeling good, and it's time to make a change. It's almost time for that part. Like, it's just a part of us. It's not who we are.
Right.
This part of us to say, okay, how can I change the way this looks, and how can I maybe put in different practices like what you're saying, and for you it's your faith, and how can I start incorporating that? And I thought that was just such a really interesting way to look at it, because one, it helps other people know that these are thoughts, and we are not alone in this. I've had them too, and especially at a really more of a darker time of my life. And we're not alone in that. And if we can look at it as almost like, okay, almost time for or she called it a rebirth. Like maybe that one part, maybe it's just a rebirth in a certain part of your life, not as you as a whole person, but, so I appreciate you sharing that.
Of course. And since I've started sharing that, and since I've been open, with talking to people about mental health and depression, I don't know if there's a person I've talked to that hasn't had struggled with mental health on some issue or had dark thoughts at some point in their life. And that's exactly why people need to talk about it, right? Because I didn't used to talk about it either. It was just like, oh, that's kind of awful.
Well, that feels so isolating, and then it starts to count. I don't know about for you, but for me, I always thought there was something wrong with me.
Yeah.
I'm the only person in the world, and there's something wrong with me.
It's very isolating, and I think that is the enemy. I think he tells you that, you aren't worthy, or this is you, and it's not. There's strength in numbers, but there's strength in community, and there's, like I said, when I've started sharing that with people, I didn't get judging looks. I didn't get like, dude, what's wrong with you? You might need to go, see a therapist or something. I go, dude, hey, I've been there, man. That's the responses I've got is like, hey, well, how can I help? That's the response you get, but sometimes it takes that little bit of vulnerability to open up to someone and share that.
Absolutely.